everyone is back, so I think we can start to very interesting session we have in the next hour. Again, I guess it's really an honor to sit with guests with me here. His Excellency Minister Cardona, Economy of Malta, Mr. Riyadh Abunayyan from Abunayyan Holding, and also Onsi Sawiris from Hof Capital. And I want to start with, again, with introduction, not about backgrounds. I hope everyone knows each other already, like almost second day. I want to ask if you have any comments about the backgrounds. Onsi, you were not here yesterday, and I want to start from you. You just briefly describe your business, then I will ask His Excellency Minister to ask direct questions.
Sure. My name is Onsi Sawiris, originally Egyptian. I've been living in the US for 7 years. I co-founded a technology venture platform around 3 years ago to focus on family businesses and investors from emerging markets, focused a bit on the Middle East who want to get access into tech, who have traditionally been involved in more traditional business lines, in more traditional sectors, and want to start getting, putting a little bit into tech, understanding tech. So rather than, being just a pure venture fund or being, doing pure tech investments, we're catering towards investors that are new to the space that want to get some access to it. My own family is also was in more a traditional business line. We used to run telecom operators, which has now become more of a utility. And so we decided that we'll bring on other family businesses, other family offices that have some need for tech, especially after what we've seen in the shift in other traditional business lines here in the Middle East and how that has affected the economy. We felt like there's a great opportunity for us to capitalize on what we see in the West, in Europe, in the US, which is basically where all the human capital is, where all the technological innovation is, and get some exposure to that, and then transfer some of that knowledge, transfer some of these technologies into emerging markets, which have a big need for solutions that can, solve a lot of problems that we see in the region.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I want to ask a question about Malta. Malta is really a very interesting country and jurisdiction for wealthy families, not from only Arab countries, but also you have recently enacted your legislation about family business, and I read that. That's really interesting. What does bring Malta to family businesses?
Yeah, thank you for the invitation, Fakhri. It's an honor to be here. I think that Malta has an advantage in terms of its geographical location, since although we are active members in the European Union, geographically we are closer to Africa. And so our catchment area in terms of our jurisdiction is quite sui generis. Family businesses in Malta, as in most other countries, are the backbone of our economy. They form mostly 80% of what happens in the economy, with employment figures running like 85–90%. So it's very critical to have a very healthy ecosystem for family businesses. And 2013, as a party in opposition, we had proposed a Family Business Act. And when we were elected to office, we started to work on family business legislation. Unfortunately, we did not find any template, any model on which we could rely upon. Not even the definition of family businesses. We had to do it all by ourselves, but slowly and gradually, with the help of Dr. Nadine Sant, we managed to have a proper legal framework on family businesses, which was eventually also approved by the European Union Commission. And today we have a Family Business Act in place, which does not regulate, but which helps transfer of family businesses from one generation to the other, not necessarily causa mortis, not necessarily because of death, but even during their lifetime. The raison d'etre of the legislation is to facilitate facilitate transmission. As you all know, family businesses have quite a unique livelihood. Only about 45% of family businesses pass through the first generation to the second. From the second to the third, it goes down to about 22%. From the third to the fourth, it goes down to nearly 10%. So this fatality, this valley of death, is indeed against the participation of more family businesses in economy. And we try to plan family businesses from day one in order to survive these generational transfers, these generational transmissions. And we do that now. In the past year, we have set up a regulator for family businesses which endorse the family businesses which qualify as a family business. We give them all the support, we give them legal advice, we give them also advice on the structure of the company, how it should be formed in the very first instance. And also we grant a number of initiatives and incentives through Malta Enterprise, which is the entity it's a government entity which promotes investment and foreign direct investment in our jurisdiction, in order to have incentives on more female participation in enterprise, more schemes which help knowledge transfer from one generation to the other, together with a number of incentives which are published in the guidelines issued by this entity. So all in all, I think it's a good model. Just as a final point, it's not only an act, a legislation, which caters for locals. It is open for any family, any family anywhere, be it in Asia, in the Middle East, in North Africa, in Africa, in Europe, and in the States and in other continents. And we have seen a number of family businesses who have relocated their identity, let's put it this way, their firm, their society, within our legislation because of this facilitation to transmit and transfer from one generation to the other.
Very good. Abunayyan is a well-known family in the region. So as His Excellency Minister pointed, a lot of families fail to transfer their wealth from one generation to another generation. Sometimes it is coming from the purpose or relating to the death, some business fatality or risks that family business has created with itself. But Abunayyan was one of the successful family businesses in the region. And interestingly enough, Riyadh is chairing Audit and Risk Committee. And it is really a very unique role that you can't find in every family businesses. This is typical to banking families, but when it comes to industrial families, it is really difficult to find very rare role. Riyadh, what is your role as a chairman of Audit and Risk Committee in the family business? So what is your basic responsibilities and what do you do in the family business? Let's say like this.
Well, I will start by relating back to what His Excellency had said. I will share some statistics particular to Saudi Arabia. 90% of Saudi companies are family owned. We have 45 of the top 100 Saudi companies are family businesses. Family businesses contribute 25% to the Saudi GDP. So you can see the weight of family business to the country. 20% of those companies are managed by the second generation, and only 10% managed by the third generation. Again, relating back to what His Excellency said, 70% of Saudi family companies have at least one case court pertaining to succession problems. So I really salute Malta, I salute His Excellency for this initiative that they're having. We have seen in the past, we have heard about big names in Saudi Arabia. Some of them are 50 years old companies. They just collapsed for the main reason of lack of corporate governance and risk management framework. So I see my role, as a traditional role of any chairman of Risk and Audit Committee. But my main objective is to lead and drive corporate governance and risk management framework in our group of companies for the sake of family business continuity, hopefully.
Thank you. My next question is to Sawiris. Sawiris family is also a well-known family, not only in Egypt, across the globe. So interestingly enough, you represent family business in technology industry. It is also very rare to find family businesses involved in technology. So they may have some lines, private equity venture lines, but full business focusing on technology, it is really rare to find. And I wanted to ask, do family businesses need new models to survive in this era?
Look, I think the most important thing is not necessarily, changing what you're good at or changing business lines or introducing a completely new, technology or a completely new line of business. But I think the most important thing is to have succession plans and looking forward and keeping an eye out for the new things that are coming out in the different sides of the world. I think it's very important to understand technology, whether if you're a traditional family that's not necessarily understanding tech, look out for the next generation. I think it's quite obvious now that we're seeing a lot of interest from the third generation family members like myself being interested in tech. So I think what's important is for the older generations to enable the next generations, to allow them to innovate in that sense and leverage what the family has built. And I think part in that is to try new things, support the new generation, but also keep them involved with the business lines that they operate in. So in essence, to me, it's a succession plan. It's looking for the future, not just looking ahead of you. And I think we are seeing that in the region right now. We're realizing that there are some sectors that could be dying. There are some sectors that require innovation. There are sectors that could be complemented with new sectors. And so I think there's a lot of appetite for that. And I think, in terms of tech especially, there should be a way to allow the next generation family members to get exposure to that, but also remain relevant to the family business. So I agree, with them that's definitely there is a lot of corporate governance that needs to be in place. There's a lot of, planning that needs to happen to be able to transfer smoothly between generations. But it's really also to lay out an actual succession plan. What do you want to look like in 20 years? What do you want to look like in 15 years? So I think that's very important. And looking at myself and what I'm, doing, I'm obviously leveraging some of the operating experience that we have within our field line of business, expanding onto that, leveraging what you see in the West, what you see in the US in innovation, and then identifying problems that we have and we face in our traditional business line to complement that. Whether it's operational problems, whether it's margin problems. For example, telecom 20 years ago was a real technology. Now it's more of a utility. And now we're still facing a lot of, CapEx. It's very capital intensive, yet you're not valued like a technology company anymore. So how can you reduce your capital expenditures by introducing technology, for example? How can you reduce your operating costs by introducing new technological solutions? And so that's an area that I think is very relevant. I also see the appetite in our region for tech, for entrepreneurship. And so my advice to families is to, leverage that, get exposure to that, and not necessarily, change your business line. I think your family business is very important. The family business should be the core of what you're doing, but you need to be open to exploring and experimenting in complementary areas to the family business.
An interesting thing is that, I don't know, was it your idea or family's decision? They sent you to study at MIT, maybe many people don't know about that. And this guy went to study at MIT, engineering, not MBA, not Harvard, something like that. How this idea came? Just I wanted to understand how did this idea come up with the families or your decision? It was your decision or someone else decided about that?
It was definitely a mutual decision. I mean, I grew up in Egypt for 18 years, and then I moved to the US and studied at MIT, as you mentioned. Most of my family members, my uncles and my parents are mostly studied abroad as well. Okay. They're all engineers, so that was not a hard choice for myself. I knew finance would come eventually. It doesn't have to be something that I studied. But it was always a goal to get exposure to international markets. I think that's very relevant. But I also think that growing up in emerging markets, you bring a very different angle to the table in the US. The US is very US focused, unfortunately. They think the US is the whole world, which I understand. It's a big market. But when you come in with experience from places like Egypt, like the Middle East, you bring a very different angle to the table, and you learn from different experts, and you build your network there. So I think in essence, obviously, I encourage studying abroad, but I encourage just diversification in general.
His Excellency Minister, I have a question to you about what areas do you see for potential collaboration between private owners of businesses and government?
Well, I think the central role of any government is to be an interlocutor, a facilitator. We have, as governments, to design and execute effectively and efficiently policy. So that is the basic demand from any modern government today. We need to listen more to private enterprise. We need to have more access to the institutions. And we need to promote more legislative flexibility. International trade is changing every second nowadays. The rules are different from the rules that we used to play with in the 80s with the United Nations Commission on International Trade Law, where you had templates for arbitration, for mediation, for e-commerce. They don't exist anymore. Legislation, local legislation, jurisdictional legislation today changes sometimes not sporadically, but even on a routine basis. Let's take, for example, the patent legislation. If you have a generic industry of pharmaceuticals, you cannot not change your patent legislation every so often, because multinationals would say, listen, we do not have comfort of your patent protection, so we will move to another jurisdiction. So I think this symbiosis, this synergy between government as a facilitator, as an enabler, and the freedom of enterprise to move flexibly, comfortably, within, of course, rules which are WTO approved, OECD approved, in our case, harmonized with EU legislation because of the acquis. That is, of course, something which is basic, but the prime role of governments in modern democracies are facilitators, interlocutors. The job is done by enterprise. Enterprise feels comfortable in a jurisdiction, not in another, because of a number of reasons, a myriad of reasons. It could be connectivity, it could be the English language, it could be the French language. It could be because of the quality of life in that particular jurisdiction or the weather. But ultimately, any businessman, any entrepreneur who is seeking a foreign jurisdiction would make the mathematics based on facilitation to trade, access to the institutions, and legislative flexibility.
Very interesting. Riyadh, my question is about how do you differentiate family business leader from public company leader? So do you think that there is something that we don't understand when you appoint family business leader, or it should be really different from public company? For example, a company called Exxon or some others in the US, and also we have a family company. Do you think that there is some link between really capital and family, which keeps the firm sustainable?
I think there is a slight difference. Being a business leader has many aspects incorporated into it. But being a family business leader, I think there is a little bit more. For a family business, you should uphold the family values and the family business values. For example, in our case, we follow the legacy of our father. The values of honesty, reliability, innovation, and being customer-centric. I think preserving the family name and reputation is really very important. Education skills are important, but it carries a little bit less weight in our organization because we develop our executives and our family members in the business itself. So, and even when we have done the family protocols in our Abunayyan family, we have set forth, rules for the family, and part of this rules pertaining to family being members of the business. So, to put it in a nutshell, being eager to develop yourself in the family business and upholding the family values close to your heart and your actions, I think is the main differentiator, let's say, between
the two. Onsi, you are Egyptian, but you live in the US. What does differentiate family businesses in the countries that you have seen, both in Egypt and you have exposure to Italy, I know, and in the US? Do you think there are differences that reflects good or bad governance in different lines of the business, or maybe whole architecture is seeming differently?
I think if you look at Egypt and you look at Egyptian family businesses, you have some narrow mindsets in terms of conservatism, but also you have a lot more cultural values that are applicable. Just like my fellow colleague mentioned, I think this is very important, the values of the family business, the values of and the integrity of the family business. And I think in the US it's a lot more on a high level. I don't think there's much cultural involvement to the family business. On the other hand, I think in the US there's definitely a little bit more institutionalization in terms of the governance, but also in terms of the ambition of a family business to grow out of the area of expertise and try to bring on other partners. And I think there's, it's not necessarily a good or bad thing, but I think if you look at the exposure you get from the US, for example, from Europe, and you apply that to Egypt, and I think that's kind of how we did it. We maintained our family values, we maintained our cultural values, we got an advantage by working in a difficult country like Egypt. It's not as easy to work there than it is to work in the US, just in terms of bureaucracies, slowdown in rules, and the government being a bit not as easy to work with, etc. I think in the US you have a better platform, people who just want to do business and want to grow. But you have an advantage once you get the experience of somewhere like Egypt. And you start thinking global and you start thinking outside of the box. You have an advantage of applying some of these skills that they're not very familiar with. And if you look at US companies that are trying to go global and try to set up shop here in the Middle East or expand into Asia, I mean, look at China. Local companies are always beating the US companies. Look at Baidu versus Google, look at Didi versus Uber.
Exactly.
I think we're seeing a similar trend here in the Middle East. Look at Careem versus Uber, for example. So I think it's very important for people like us in emerging markets to have that exposure to the culture, to the understanding of the people, to the understanding of the consumer, the end clients, and the customers. And I think the US, they lack that. And that's why when we're based in the US, when we look at companies there, we always make sure that when they think of going global, when they want to unlock new markets, they work with local partners. They work with people here in the region, for example, work with people that have the expertise, but also the deep roots and understanding of these markets. And I think that in exchange is going to help us also, get more families involved in technology, because that's when they can bring value. They like, a lot of people based here like to see something tangible. They don't want to just be passive or blinded into something. And so when you offer them the opportunity to work hands-on with a company, bring it into the region, win some government contracts, get them exposure to the right people, that gets them excited, I think, and that's when they'll be more involved and they'll get a little bit more excited to do a bit of work outside of their areas of expertise.
Cool. Very good. Minister Cardona, let's talk about the future. What we should expect from Malta in the future for individuals, wealth individuals, called family businesses or just entrepreneurs. What are you going to do in the future? Like, whatever you do is very innovative indeed. Family business legislation, trust, everything. Like, you have one-stop shop for everything in terms of you offer residence. And what is the next? Do you have something in your mind that maybe, if it is not secret?
No, not at all. I think the secret of the success of an economy like ours is due to the fact that we have managed to diversify in a sustainable manner the sectors which contribute to the economy. Until 50 years ago, Malta was a colony. Our economy was completely based on military activity of the British forces in the island. We have no natural resources whatsoever. So Malta is just a huge, big rock in the middle of the Mediterranean, not connected to the mainland. So we have even an additional transportation cost in everything we have. But as a country in these 50 years, we have, I think, identified and preempted niche markets which were being introduced globally, maybe less so in the European continent. And so our economy base now is a very good mixture of what is indigenous industry, and so manufacturing, which started 45, 50 years ago, plastic molding, steel fabrication, etc., together with the new markets which emerged in manufacturing, which now are bringing about life sciences, manufacturing, DNA, genomic industries, etc., together with the fact that we have a service base, which is mainly based on tourism, hospitality, entertainment, together with a very robust and firm banking sector, financial services, which are there not because we grant special tax privileges. Malta is not a tax haven. We do not grant special tax privileges, but because of our reputable financial services sector, together with new clusters like aviation, like maritime industry, like industries which are emerging in new generic manufacturing of pharmas and things like this, which together make our economy a sustainable yet not so volatile sectors. Of course, if you had to predict the future, I would say that we need to do more micro-targeting. As a country, we need to identify more the potentials that can be realized in a tangible way in the coming years. It is quite a waste to try and exert a lot of pressure and work and force when you know a priori that your jurisdiction is not compatible to a sector. For example, it is a known fact that the textile industry in Malta doesn't work. The textile industry has migrated from our area to Serbia and to North Africa and Tunisia and neighbors of the MENA region. So it is useless to try and identify potential investors in the textile industry because you know that it will be there for 2, 3, 4 years. So the potentiality has to be in the forecast, in the vision that any government has. And of course, in creating the right ecosystem, the right environment, which, as my colleagues said earlier, facilitate more family businesses, while retaining, as Riyadh said, the moral values of business. Indeed, I think one of the most difficult tasks we had in our legislation on family businesses, apart from creating a definition chapter on family businesses, on who is entitled and who is not, etc., was to try and quantify legislatively the value element of family businesses, which is which you cannot quantify and you cannot qualify. So taking into perspective, this lack that we couldn't do because you cannot value the moral values, you cannot give a value to them. Yet we know that they have to remain there, and they are pivotal for any business, family business, to remain transmitting and succession from one generation to the other. We had to keep this in mind by creating a balance which hopefully would work. We have tested it. It seems that it is working out. There are other jurisdictions who are emulating this model, and we are very happy that other larger jurisdictions are trying out this model as well. And hopefully the results will be seen clearer in our growth, in our economic growth in the next few years.
Excellent. So it is not surprise that you develop so fast. My next question to Riyadh, Abunayyan. Riyadh, we're living in a technology area. So how Abunayyan Holding is ready for the next technological revolution coming up? So what do you do as innovation or preparation that you know everything is getting transformed fast?
Of course, innovation is part of any successful business. Technology is a derivative of innovation. And, we at Abunayyan, this is a strategic objective to us. We are focused on localizing technologies, having technology transfers in the fields of water, our field, water, power, construction, and oil and gas. We do this with our international partners. We have several joint ventures that are, for this sole purpose of localizing the technology and transferring technology. We want to be, we don't want to be importers of products. We want to be providers of technology and developers of it. Today, even our investments are directed towards this strategic objective that we have. I can relate to what my colleague Onsi said, and I salute his group because they are in that track. Having this technology brought in to the family business. And, it's not just IT, but it's different aspect of technologies pertaining to the business itself. And we are very fortunate in Saudi Arabia. We have a government that is promoting technology transfer and technology localization. We have policies put in place for this strategic objective, and the vision of the country, the plan of the country has emphasized that.
So at the moment you embed all innovations that you have seen in the past to the family business. Is that correct? So
yes, we are we are localizing the technologies. In the past, Saudi Arabia was a big consumer. We just import everything. but now it is different. Everything has to be localized, whether it's production or the technology behind the production. So we are doing this. We are localizing, and we are localizing together with our leading international partners with a mutual understanding that technology should be localized.
Thank you. Onsi, question is, this family business, like two words, and both of them are institutions, family and business. You said family business needs somehow governance, yeah? So where do you see the biggest challenge as an institution? So first is the business itself. So we talked about technology. You said, okay, you are trying to build something related to technology, or you are in technology already. And we have another side, family world itself. So society is changing fast also. Which of them is more risky in today's world? Family institution or business institution? Like, considering that we are going towards individualism, everyone makes her or his own shape on digital media. So this is very interesting and important point. I know, like, coming from your engineering mathematical background, maybe you have calculated something on that.
No, I think definitely on the family side, it's a lot more important. I wouldn't say it's riskier, but I think, transferring and getting, that experience from the other generations and to be able to follow through, their simple methodologies that they've applied to their business lines. I think that's quite important. I think, maintaining some of these values and some of these, performances of how you think and performances of how your family has established the business itself before the business started. I think that is key. I think obviously business risks, there are cycles. You need to know how to act in the days that we're in, like today. We need to, that there will be bad days coming up as well. You need to be able to know how, to handle these situations. But I think that also comes through the family, backing and the family's values as well. So I think it's a mix of both. I would highlight that I think one of the most important aspects of keeping that string going is like my fellow colleague Riyadh said, how to leverage what the family has been doing traditionally and then apply it within the family business itself. I was always encouraged to go do your own thing. You learn from others. You learn a lot from the family, but it's always important to also learn from outsiders, third party, people that you will come to meet, and when you build your own kind of career. So I think that was a very important part of it as well. And I think if you're narrowly focused on just leveraging what your fathers and grandfathers have been doing, that's obviously very, very valuable. And I think this is part of the risk today that you mentioned. There's a lot of social media. People are looking at all over the world. You can now you can sit on your phone and you know everything about every country in the world. I think that's very valuable. But ultimately, maintaining your competitive advantage is by learning and transferring this knowledge from the older generations of your family members to the next. And as I said, I think the business, comes and goes. I think cycles come and go. I think it's mostly important to stick to your roots and be able to apply some of the things they've applied in the past to the modern world. But at the same time, also bring a new blood to the mix. Bring in new ideas that hopefully will also be supported by the older generation. As long as there is you're not coming as long as you could slowly proving yourself out, I think you'll get a lot more trust and credibility from within the family, and I think that's kind of the right path to go by it. I want to highlight one just very important factor that Riyadh mentioned. I think we've been traditionally in this region been limited because of the ideology of importing, and I think I really want to highlight that and I want to emphasize that because we've always been doing copy paste as opposed to real invention and real innovation. And I think nowadays we're starting to realize that there's a lot of potential in the region. Strategics like family businesses are starting to become a lot more involved and contribute a lot more to the ecosystems, whether it's tech or tech-related opportunities. I think it's very important for us to start building bottoms-up opportunities integrating things from abroad. And obviously we can take, we can learn from what they built in the US. We can learn from some of the technological innovation there. But I think we have a lot more opportunity here. We have a lot more fundamental problems that can be solved. Yes, Careem and Uber are great luxury items that we can, you can book your cab, but I think, in the financial world, there's a lot that can be done. In the healthcare world, especially in Africa, North Africa, I think the UAE has adopted a great model that people like us in Egypt and in other GCC countries can take advantage of. So, but I think one big factor to that is strategic families starting to become and contribute a lot more to the ecosystem. And I think that's what we're also starting to do is how can we contribute from a futuristic perspective? How can we contribute to the future, leveraging what we've done in the past?
Excellent. This is a very interesting topic. We can talk hours, days. I want to ask if audience has a question. Otherwise, we should give the panel to Lael to start another one. Is there a question? No. So